You're tuning in to Financial Fitness Northwest live on 1150 KKNW. We provide our listeners with information from business professionals to bring solutions to your daily life and local charities to provide you with the opportunities to give back to your community as well. And today we are here with Mary Ellen Stone. Mary Ellen is the Executive Director of King County Sexual Assault Resource Center. She oversees an organization of more than 50 staff and works closely with the 18-member board of directors to meet King County Sexual Assault Council vision and mission. For over 30 years, Mary Ellen has been a visionary leader in changing the landscape of sexual assault prevention, education, and victim advocacy. She has built partnerships with key businesses, companies, local governments, and organizations so that victims and their families have a voice. Mary Ellen received a master's in counseling from the University of Minnesota. She is a program graduate of Leadership Tomorrow and the Alki Foundation. She presently serves on several boards and task forces, including the City of Seattle Police Chief Search Committee and Mental Illness Drug Dependency Oversight Committee and the Seattle Archdiocese Review Board. Welcome, Mary Ellen.
Oh, thank you so much. It's
There are
good
a
to be
lot
here.
of big words.
There are a lot of big words.
You're busy, I
You
think.
have got it going on, changing things. So we're so glad to have you on here to share with us, who is the King County Sexual Assault Resource Center? What do you guys do? What are you?
Sure. Well, as our name suggests, we work with victims of sexual assault and their families every day. I mean, that's our goal, is to help victims recover their lives and make that transition from being victimized to being a survivor. So we offer a range of services for children, teens, and adults who've been victimized by sexual assault, whether the assault happened last week, last year, or 40 years ago.
Okay.
We respond to the whole gamut of what's happened to people. We know that people can get through this and get better. So we specialize our work with some real specific trauma-focused work. There's a lot of things that really help people get through post-traumatic stress, anxiety, depression as related to sexual assault. So we've got people trained to do that. We also help people through the criminal justice system, which is pretty daunting for most of us. And so we have a cadre of trained people who really will literally walk people through that whole process. Plus a 24-hour resource line. I know you've been running that Air Spa, and that's terrific because a lot of times people don't know, what do I do? Who do I call?
Right.
I just found out about this because it's happened to somebody I love. So we're there as a resource. And all of our services are in Spanish as well as in English.
Oh, perfect.
So I'm just wondering, would you say this is an epidemic? Is it on the rise, or is it just that there's more awareness?
I think it's more awareness. I mean, we have known for decades that about a quarter of all children experience some sort of sexual assault.
A quarter,
Oh my
25%.
25% girls and boys before they reach the age of 18. So what's new, and you look at Me Too as a great example, is that people are now starting to come forward and say, this happened to me, this happened to somebody that I loved, and that's starting to change the conversation. So it feels like it's happening more, but we're not. But the research is not bearing that out.
It's just we're talking about it more,
We're talking about it,
which is good.
which is really important.
Right.
It is. Creating that awareness. I think that's probably
Right.
why more people are coming out, because there's safety in numbers. And
Right.
my husband just told me night before last, I think he read about the U.S. gymnastics team.
Yeah.
And I was just so appalled.
Oh, yeah. It's
Just-
really, really
Well,
sad.
and
disheartening.
How is that happening? I don't get it.
Well, but what we know is most of the time the person who assaults somebody or a lot of people
has
in the
been
case,
assaulted, right?
more often than not knows the victim.
Oh.
So it's like, the gymnastic case, big high profile thing.
Right.
But this person
Right.
was known, revered, had access. No one was going to challenge him. When I look
Right.
at our stats for King County, it's about 80% of the time victims, the offender knows that they know each other.
They have a
relationship. They're known. We used to think, I want to go back to what you just said.
Yeah.
We used to think that that if you were sexually assaulted, you would turn out to be a sex offender.
Uh-huh.
That's not true.
Okay.
More often, you're going to be, hurting yourself rather than hurting other people. But that belief, which I'm so glad you said that, because that belief that that you're going to turn into a sex offender is one of the things that really discourages boys and men from coming forward, because they think they're, people are going to think that I've turned into this monster, or I will turn into this monster, and that's not the case. But we need to get that information.
We do,
out.
because the reason that's even in my mind is because I know someone that was sexually assaulted, and that's what she was told by like counselors, that she was more likely to sexually assault somebody else when she was a kid. Isn't that horrible?
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
So it's really good that we're to turn around it to the facts.
right.
It's not true.
Right. And I mean, the other thing I would say is we often hear from people who were assaulted as kids.
Okay.
And who are now in their 50s, 60s, 70s or older. And they're still struggling with some of that. And some
Like
of
they
that
never
might be
told anyone.
like they
and-
never told anybody,
Wow.
or they were never, or they felt like that could never be believed, or they got that kind of misinformation.
Right.
And that's really not
Not the
that's
case.
not
Yeah.
helpful
No.
to hear you're going to turn into a sex offender. I mean,
Right.
yeah, I mean, because
Especially a young person, they don't-
especially a young person, right? Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. That's not helpful at all.
No.
I would think because people, like you said, it's usually someone that they know. Does that make it even harder for them to come forth and tell somebody?
Oh, sure. I mean,
It's like-
again, I mean, look at the Me Too stuff as one type of
Yep.
examples. I mean, I think that there's a lot of pressure to not say anything because I'm not going to be believed. They're going to believe him. He's the coach. He's whatever. He's going to be believed. I think the other thing that we often misunderstand is the risks that victims take in coming forward, because
Right.
if you're putting yourself out there, and it's the person who other people may know,
Right.
it's going to be your word, perhaps against his. You are putting at risk maybe everything you have, your friend circle, your work, all of those. And people say, well, why didn't you come forward sooner? Well, why would you?
Yeah.
I mean, given the repercussions and given the way people blame victims for what happened to them, there's not a lot of incentive for people to come forward, which is again one of the things with Me Too that's really great, because that is encouraging people in a way that we've not seen before. This is the time. It's okay to speak out.
Right.
You don't have to, but if you want to, there's more support than there ever has been.
Wow. So, back to your guys' organization,
Yeah.
what's one of the unique, agencies, unique things about your guys' agency and programs that you guys
Sure.
provide?
Well, we just work on trauma. I mean, you would think that would be really difficult and depressing. It's not, because we see people's lives change.
Right.
But we are specialists at what we do. So we know what trauma looks like. We also know, how people react to that. We know how families react, and how families may need a lot of additional information and support on what do I do now that I know this happened to my child? I mean, how do I, as a mom, respond to that, or as a grandmother, or as an
Right.
aunt? So we're able to really stand with people and help them through something that most of us are not at all prepared for. Plus, we know how the legal system works, so we're very good at that. And then we also do some prevention education, and we also look at how the laws work, because that's a big piece of it. We want to make sure that the laws provide victims the support and safety that they deserve. And so we work in Olympia and off session as well to say, how can we make those laws work better for people?
So are people calling in and that's how they come to you? Is it other people, organizations that recommend people to you? Or?
All of it. So
All of
probably
it?
about half of the calls that we respond to about 3,000 victims, 3,000 to 4,000 victims a year.
Wow.
About half of those come from people who just know that there's a service like us, so it might be a friend or a family member. The other half come from maybe law enforcement, children's protective services, schools, other kinds of institutions like that.
And so when they first approach you, then what does that look like in your organization? How does your service, what do you do? What do you do
We
first?
we find out what they need.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, most people don't know, and so
Right.
we will spend an hour and a half with somebody, really trying to sort out what are all the things that are going on. What certainly understanding what happened to them, or the loved one, the child, or the whoever they're calling about. But then it's figuring out, here are the services that we offer. Here's how we can provide maybe this kind of support, this kind of information, connect you up with other kinds of resources that you might need. So it's a very individualized approach to saying each person has their unique needs and unique experience. We want to understand that and then figure out how, given our experience, how we can package a set of services for them that's going to help them get to where they need to go.
Are these free services that you offer?
They are. We bill for our therapy, which is very intensive mental health therapy. We bill Medicaid and private insurance. The rest of the services are at no cost, and we rely both on government funding but also on private donations. About 25% of our budget comes from individuals, corporations, and foundations that realize this is important to me, important to us, our community, and so we want to make a financial contribution to make sure that we continue.
In addition to financial contributions, is there anything else you guys need? Volunteers, or is it really just monetary?
Yeah, there is so much. I mean, certainly financial contributions are always valued
Right.
and important. We have a number of areas for volunteers, particularly in working with the criminal justice system and monitoring that. We also have a very large event coming up at the end of at the end of February, that we're always looking for volunteers to help us with.
Okay.
And then there's a lot of getting the word out. We've made a lot of progress in the last ever so many years, and there's still opportunities for people to learn about what we do and to learn about sexual assault, how they can talk about it, how they can help friends or family members.
Right. So, what do you think that we need to do, like as a society, to end or diminish this issue?
Yeah, and
It's
that's
just like so disheartening that we, have this issue and we're talking about it so much more. But
I know.
how do we change it?
I think there's no one magic bullet on that. I think some of it is really us bringing this out into the light so that we know we're not talking about something that's a rarity, that doesn't happen. So some of that is certainly already happening. I think another thing we need to look at is, what are all those factors that contribute to sexual assault? Because this doesn't just happen overnight.
Right.
We have to look at, how do we look at gender roles, and how do we look at issues of healthy relationships and healthy dating, and what does consent in a dating relationship or in a relationship look like? How do we look at sexuality, and how do we think about what the role of men and women are, and where does consent or lack of consent come into that? So I think those are all sort of bigger social things that we need to say. How do people we have to also think about things like, how is sort of aggressive behavior towards another person acceptable and encouraged, and because those factors all lead into creating a climate that says some sort of sexual assault or domestic violence is perfectly acceptable. And so what we need to be able to do is challenge that too.
Right.
And I think another thing is looking at, how can we not blame victims? It's really easy. It's really easy to say, well, what was she wearing, and what was she doing, and why didn't you do this, and
That's
you
easy.
should have known. But, we
Yeah.
can all do that, because we're all in conversations all the time. And somebody will say, well, what about
Right.
whatever?
Right.
It's like, well, I wouldn't have done that. Well, of course not. I mean, she wouldn't have done that either had she known that this was going to be the outcome.
Exactly.
And so it's very easy to distance ourselves. And I think that's, again, where this is such an important time, because we're hearing from people we know and love, we admire, who are public people, to say, look, this happened to me, and here's how I'm reacting. And so it puts a face on it in a way that that we've not been able to do before. But I think we have to sort of look at the more we can encourage people to come forward, the more then we can hold offenders accountable.
Right.
We can't hold them accountable if
No one's saying
if no one
anything.
is saying anything.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
It sounds like it kind of needs to start in the schools too, from what I hear you saying when you're talking about what a relationship looks like. I mean,
Absolutely.
young people
Yeah.
that don't have an example
Absolutely.
of a
Yeah.
healthy relationship
Yeah.
may not really know and find things acceptable that are
Right.
not
Right.
acceptable.
Because maybe
Absolutely.
things are happening in their home life. Right.
Sure. Sure.
And they
we
don't know.
we do some work in schools. We'd like to be doing more work with schools. We certainly want to encourage schools to be getting programs in place because yeah, you're right. I mean, I think and it's also the sort of thing like anything and you as professionals, you don't just hear it once and think, "Oh, okay, now I know." You have to hear it and you have to
Sure.
hear it.
Yeah.
You have to see examples and so what you hear in your home or in your church or in your school or on social media. I mean, all
Right.
of those places need to be able to say, this is actually how you behave.
Mm-hmm.
And this other kind of behavior, it's not okay. Don't do it.
Right.
There are repercussions if you do.
Yeah. There's a lot of things that
Interesting.
need to start in the school.
Yeah, that's really true.
And I
So-
think, though, that if I may say,
Yeah.
parents should encourage schools to do that. A lot of times schools feel like, we don't want to do this because we're afraid we're going to upset the parents.
Yeah.
If the parents were there talking to the teachers and the principal and the school board say, we really need this and we're going to support you on it, that would help the schools.
Oh, absolutely.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Get out there, parents.
I'm on board.
All right, good.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Mary Ellen. And thank you for tuning into Financial Fitness. When we come back, we'll have the Riley Johnson Team Market Update. Today, we're going to be discussing, what are we discussing? You'll have to find out. Stay tuned.